Hey everybody, I want to talk about the biggest shockers from the White Lotus season 2 finale. It's one of the classic moments when she says, "Yeah, you got this," and then falls. Just because it's Jennifer Coolidge, right? Like her delivery is just so perfect. If you haven't watched the episode yet, this is not the video for you. This is pure commentary, pure opinion. I think the most annoying thing for me about the finale was how long it took them to kill off Tanya. Because Tanya was so rich and let's face it, she's a little bit stupid too, a little bit naive. To me, it was so obvious from the beginning that she was going to be the one to go, especially because her husband, Greg, had to leave Sicily in a big rush, and it just set her up for being alone, and you just knew she was exposed from that point on. Okay, I'm literally sitting here editing the White Lotus season 2 video, and I had to tell you something that I just realized. So if you've watched season 1, you remember that Tanya, not Tanya, flew to Hawaii to scatter her mother's ashes. And there's literally that scene where they go out in the yacht, she's dressed all in black, and she has the ashes. And if that's not foreshadowing her death, I don't know what is. I was tapping into my dark side and I was thinking, okay, if I was the hitman or if I was the person planning this, how would I have gotten rid of Tanya? And I think it would have made a lot more sense at the party in Palermo because she was intoxicated, her judgment was not all there, she was being seduced by that attractive mafia guy. Like, her head was just not in the game, right? And she had not yet put all of the pieces together. I know the reason they took her out on the water is because they thought it would be easier to dispose of the body, but I'm just saying, like, the whole sequence of them checking out of the house in Palermo and then getting on the boat and then being on the boat all day and then the dinner, to me, was just super drawn out. The second idea would have been to put something in her wine. She just kept drinking more and more white wine on the balcony of the yacht, and I'm thinking to myself, wouldn't it have been so easy to just put something in her drink? But anyways, I have to say the moment she actually died was so awkward, and I kind of got a chuckle out of it. When I was watching the show, my dad and I were both saying, like, why is she 20 feet behind where the boat is? The boat is so far back from the actual yacht that you're like, hey, that's not even lined up. Another thing I noticed too is she's still wearing those ridiculous 5 to 6 inch heels when she jumps off the boat. A lot of people thought one of the murders was going to be Cameron or Ethan, and I have to admit, at my family watch party of this, half the people there guessed that, but I knew better. Having watched season 1 of White Lotus, I knew that was probably too obvious. I personally would have thought it would have been a lot more interesting if Daphne killed Ethan when they went on that side trip, because there was this feeling that they were kind of hovering around Ethan's money because he had just cashed out his company, and Cameron and Daphne to me kind of came across as like a little bit vapid and maybe gold diggers as well. So I'm just throwing that in there, that I thought that would have personally been a lot more interesting and a lot more unexpected. Side note, you might be noticing this huge longhorn picture behind me. That's something my husband picked out, and I let him pick it out. And it's still here because this is the room in the house that has the best lighting. So all I gotta say is sometimes you have to let your spouse have a decor win, and that's his decor win. Another thing I want to talk about that not a lot of people are talking about is the very last scene with Lucia and Maya. And they're walking down the street in Taormina, and they stop by the front of the hotel. I don't know if it's the Four Seasons where it was filmed or not. And she gives a hug to this guy. And right away, I'm watching this with my family, and I turn to them and I'm like, that's the guy that was the pimp. And they all say, no, I don't think it was. I'm standing by my theory that it was, which would mean that the entire thing with Lucia and Albie was a setup from the jump, right? So meaning, like, when they go to the countryside to meet their family and the pimp shows up and Lucia says, I have to go with him, like, even that was a setup, right? Or even when he's chasing her through the streets when she's getting ice cream with Albie, even that was a setup. And I knew that girl was cold. I didn't think she was that cold. So I think she was a master con artist from the beginning. I think she saw him as someone who was young and naive, who she could take advantage of. And I don't know what the status of her relationship is with that guy. Maybe they're friends, maybe they're a couple, but it goes to show the three of them were totally in on it from the beginning. I knew she was a hustler. I didn't think she was that ruthless. I know Portia is a character that not a lot of people like, but I have to admit there were some really earnest moments between her and the other characters in this last episode that kind of shone for me. So I love the scene where she meets Albie at the airport. They've both kind of been screwed over. They're like these, you know, these naive young kids, and they realize that you have to be a lot more savvy and you kind of have to have your backup when you're out in the world. And they bond over it, right? And they exchange numbers, and I think there's something really cute about it. And I actually think they would be a really good couple. When she is on that side trip with Jack, side trip / kidnapping, I should say, she's like so desperate to let her boss know what's going on. They're actually both wanting to put together the pieces for each other. And it's almost like this pseudo mother-daughter relationship. I do think Jack was intending to kill Portia just to keep her mouth shut about the whole plot. I do think there was some love there, like a very twisted, toxic kind of love, but I do think he cared about her, and I think that's why he ultimately let her go at the airport. My biggest takeaway from this season of White Lotus was we all have all this internal drama and these insecurities bubbling up inside. Like, we're watching all of these super wealthy people just chomp around on their vacation, and they just end up getting into all these super messy situations. I think that was my first takeaway, and I think the second takeaway was like things are never quite as they seem. Sabrina Impacciatore, who plays Valentina, the hotel manager, she seems like somebody who would never break the rules, like somebody who's very straight-laced and is kind of a hard ass. But in the end, she ends up kind of being a total mess, right? She sleeps with Mia. She fires the long-term piano player right when he comes back after his heart attack, which was super cold in my opinion. And it's just kind of a mess. You know, I'm excited for season 3. I think season 3 is going to focus on Greg and what he's going to do, because like he thought he was going to end up with the love of his life and all this money. And now he just has all this money. And it's like we're back to the same problem that all White Lotus characters that are at least guests of the hotel experience, is that they have a ton of money and they're miserable. So let's see how Greg handles that in season 3. I'm very sad to say goodbye to Jennifer Coolidge. She was absolutely fantastic in this season. But I think it was pretty obvious she was going to die. I think it's funny that Tanya died. It's not funny that she died, but it's like a little ridiculous at the same time how she died.